Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last session of the day. This went by super quickly. I'm incredibly excited to present our panelists for today, Rod Havriluk, Swimming Technology Research, and Coach Paco Navarro, a consultant, very well known in the swimming field, both of them. So we're incredibly excited for them to present today traditional versus non-traditional training. So with that, Rod, the screen is all yours.
Okay. Could you go to the next slide, please? Let's compare traditional training and non-traditional training. With traditional training, usually the emphasis is on training distance, and there's a minor emphasis on training at race pace. So most of the distance is swum at non-race pace. With non-traditional training, such as ultra short race-based training, USRPT, the training is swum at race pace, and it's a much shorter distance, so there is time. With traditional training, we have little time for other activities. With race-based training, non-traditional training, we have time for deliberate practice and biomechanical analyses. And there are 10 components of deliberate practice. There are 10 different biomechanical analyses. And because the emphasis can be put on technique as well as conditioning, it reinforces effective technique. But we don't have the same reinforcement of effective technique with traditional training. Now, that's all I'll say for now, and I'll turn it over to Coach Paco, and he'll explain the success he's had with non-traditional training.
Buenas tardes. Sí, yo soy Paco Navarro, estoy investigando el entrenamiento deportivo desde hace 20 años, soy entrenador de fuerza y acondicionamiento físico desde hace 30 y entrenador de natación desde hace 10 años. La intención de la presentación es mostrar cómo utilizando la ciencia real, con técnica óptima biomecánica en natación y utilizando la metodología de USRPT se puede mejorar el rendimiento, reducir el riesgo de lesiones y mejorar la salud mental y física de los nadadores. El primer caso que expongo es de una chica nadadora, Ángela Fernández, de 17 años, que tenía una lesión de hombro cuando llegó a entrenar conmigo, causado por un alto volumen de entrenamiento, 6.000 metros al día, 6 días en semana, y además tenía un gran uso intensivo de palas, que es lo que se usa normalmente en los clubs, junto con aletas, pull buoys, tablas y otro tipo de herramientas que nosotros no usamos con esta metodología. El resultado es que esta chica visitaba frecuentemente al fisioterapeuta 2 veces por semana durante meses y estaba bastante en alto riesgo de abandonar el deporte. Además, su rendimiento se veía, por supuesto, condicionado por estos problemas y nunca conseguía clasificarse para los campeonatos regionales, ni siquiera aquí en España. Empezó a entrenar conmigo en septiembre del 2024 y los cambios que le hicimos, en primer lugar, es dejar de usar palas, nosotros no las usamos, redujimos un 80% el volumen de entrenamiento hasta 1.200 metros al día en lugar de 6.000 y 5 días a la semana en lugar de 6. Y nos enfocamos en el modelo técnico que el doctor Havriluk ha explicado muchas veces en presentaciones y en sus artículos, el modelo biomecánico más óptimo para la eficiencia en natación y evitar también las lesiones, sobre todo de hombros, y se enfoca también a través del entrenamiento USRPT. Las correcciones técnicas principales las podemos ver en la fotografía. Antes ella nadaba con un índice de coordinación negativo, lo que le llamamos catch-up, en España punto muerto, y le corregimos esto. Y también corregimos la entrada de la mano y del brazo en el agua, en lugar de empezar a tirar del hombro en la posición del brazo estirado hacia adelante, hacer que el hombro, como se ve bien el brazo en la diapositiva, en el dibujito que hay ahí de doctor Havriluk, la mano apunta hacia el fondo, hacia adelante, de forma que el hombro está en una posición menos perjudicada, ¿no? Digamos. El resultado es que ella dejó de tener problemas de hombros, volvió a estar enamorada de su deporte y los padres pues ahorraron bastante en fisioterapia. La primera vez, además, ha sido conseguido por primera vez calificarse para una competición regional, además en 4 pruebas, e incluso llegó a la final en el 50 metros libres. Ninguno de mis 12 nadadores, de los que yo entreno personalmente, porque soy entrenador personal, yo no trabajo en ningún club, sino que tengo entrenadores, tengo nadadores a los que entreno de forma individual. Ninguno de ellos tiene problemas con los hombros, todos mejoran sus tiempos y sus marcas personales. Tengo nadadores desde 14 hasta 22 años de edad y utilizando 5 sesiones a la semana, de menos de 90 minutos cada sesión. El enfoque, como decía, está basado en la mejora continua basada en la biomecánica y en la técnica y utilizando la metodología USRPT. El otro ejemplo es el del Club Triatlón ADS aquí en Sevilla, donde entrenaban entre 9.000 y 12.000 metros a la semana, aproximadamente 35 o 40 nadadores, y usaban palas, aletas, pull buoys y ejercicios tradicionales. Su mejor clasificación había sido un puesto número 28 en el Nacional Junior en el año 2024. Tras entrenarles durante 8 meses con esta metodología, nadando únicamente 6.000 metros a la semana con la metodología USRPT y utilizando series específicas para el deporte del triatlón, que ahora veremos algún ejemplo de ellos, y sin ningún tipo de herramientas, ni palas, ni aletas, ni nada de eso. El equipo de triatlón seniors llegó a ser campeón regional en triatlón cross y el equipo junior del puesto 28 este año ha sido el quinto en los campeonatos nacionales junior de triatlón. Los trabajos específicos enfocados en triatlón que hemos utilizado dentro de la metodología USRPT, pero hemos añadido unos cambios como por ejemplo el nado en paralelo, 2, 3 y hasta 4 nadadores, como se ve en la fotografía, molestándose en el nado, que es como se nada en aguas abiertas, comenzando las sesiones con un sprint y terminándolas con otro sprint, como se nada en aguas abiertas normalmente, y también utilizando adelantamientos y respiración frontal, como se ve en la diapositiva de abajo, en la fotografía. Las correcciones las realizaba en el momento utilizando USRPT. En cada serie pues corregía problemas técnicos y en algunos casos difíciles pues también aislábamos al nadador o nadadora para corregirles aparte y en ese caso a lo mejor incluso podíamos introducir algún tipo de herramienta, pero solo con la intención de corregir inmediatamente, volver al modelo de USRPT de series sin ningún tipo de herramienta. Finalmente, bueno, pues el enfoque mío es el aplicar la ciencia real para reducir los riesgos de lesiones. El ritmo de prueba, de entrenamiento, ritmo de prueba incrementa la motivación y la eficiencia en los nadadores y con menor volumen el entrenamiento es más inteligente y se consigue mejor rendimiento y también mejor salud.
Okay, deliberate practice was developed by a psychologist over 30 years ago. And he found how experts practice to become experts. And I only have time to talk about a couple of the components of deliberate practice, but such as just task difficulty. That can be done by having a swimmer swim a short distance. For example, for a very young or beginning swimmer, have them just push off from the wall, maybe take a couple of strokes. Even for a teenager, to only have them swim 15 meters. And then you can, as you see, number 5 is to provide immediate feedback. You can do that when they've only swum such a short distance. The first 7 are really the responsibility of the coach. The last 3 are swimmer's responsibility. And if you look at number 10, to engage in solo practice. That's something very rarely done in a competitive swimming situation. Very few swimmers will train on their own. To show you the success that you can have with deliberate practice, if you would go to the next screen. This shows just how deliberate practice compares with something more traditional. The red bars are deliberate practice. The yellow bars are experiments with traditional practice. The active drag coefficient is the best overall measure of swimming technique. And these values are shown as effect sizes, which standardizes the value. Now, the statistically significant findings have an asterisk. So you can see that short-term deliberate practice is comparable to long-term traditional practice. And if you look at the ages of the swimmers, once swimmers become teenagers, traditional practice is almost has nothing to do with technique. Only deliberate practice will have an impact. For the biomechanical analyses, by the time swimmers are 10 years old, they need to be analyzed with above surface video, underwater video. And they should also know their stroke counts. That should be a regular process in their training. By the time they reach 11 and 12 years old, the index of coordination, exposure time to shoulder stress, intracycle, hand force variations are all important measures for a swimmer to progress. Then for teenagers, the active drag coefficient, stroke cycle phase times, intracycle velocity variations, and the symmetry index should all be measured for them. The index of coordination is unappreciated, just how important it is. It's important not only to get swimmers to swim faster, but also to prevent injuries. If you look at the middle image, a zero index of coordination, the swimmer is about to start pulling when she's done pushing. So there's no gap or no overlap in propulsion. She's ready to start generating propulsion as soon as she finishes generating propulsion. Now with a negative index of coordination, that's not the case. The entry arm is not ready to start pulling when the opposite arm finishes. So there's a gap in propulsion. And that's typically called catch-up stroke, probably the most common drill in competitive swimming and the least productive. A positive index of coordination, and this is really where the potential is. The entry arm is ready to start pulling before the opposite hand has finished the push. That's a positive index of coordination. There are overlaps in propulsion. And unfortunately, we only see just a little bit above 0%. In other words, competitive swimmers are only slightly positive. There's tremendous potential in swimming with a higher percentage index of coordination. Hand force variations reveal a great deal of information about technique. The yellow line is synchronized with the video image. The red circle shows that on the pull phase, the swimmer increases force very slowly. There's a potential there to swim faster. The red arrow shows a loss in propulsion between the pull and push phases. Again, if these technique limitations are dealt with, a swimmer would go much faster. So there's tremendous potential from doing this. And both of these technique elements are very, very common. Many swimmers generate insufficient force on the pull phase and have a loss in force on the pull to push transition. The active drag coefficient is extremely important to measure because it does give us the best overall measure of technique. And from the graphs, you can see that young swimmers, the 9 and 10s, 11 and 12s, they decrease their drag coefficient. In other words, they improve their technique until they become teenagers. Once they become teenagers, there's no improvement in their technique. Intracycle velocity variations are important to measure because they show where in a stroke cycle to look. This is breaststroke, and the dip is where breaststrokers are breathing. And you can see for about 0.2 of a second, swimmers almost stop dead. In other words, their swimming velocity goes almost to zero when they're breathing. And the saddest thing about this is that this has been the case for almost 100 years. Karpovich found this out in 1930. And swimmers are still elevating their heads and torsos above the surface. And when they do that, their swimming velocity essentially stops. And finally, the symmetry index. Now, these are the force curves, the hand force curves for a very fast swimmer. He was in college when he was tested, and with the pre-test, his left hand was about 50 pounds. His peak force for his left hand was about 50 pounds. The peak force for his right hand was only about 30 pounds. Now, he was given this information. He had time to work on it, and then he was post-tested. And then the post-test, he was able to generate about 50 pounds with his right hand as he was with his left hand. And after this test, he participated in the Olympics, and he made the finals of the 50 freestyle. So I hope I've just given you a brief taste of how important deliberate practice and these biomechanical measures can be. So with using USRPT, you're not only able to condition a swimmer at race pace, but you have sufficient time for the 10 deliberate practice components and the 10 biomechanical analyses. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rod and Paco. This was an incredible presentation, and we're right on time, but I want to make sure we get to the audience's questions. So I combined a couple of the questions into one. So one, what do you think would be good motivation among swimmers in training in order to adopt new techniques in practice? / when is a good age to start getting very technical about technique?
Well, as I showed in the presentation, they are not ever videoed. So to start that at 10 and with 10 and unders, both above surface, below surface, and stroke counts, that's a bare minimum. But a 10-year-old is certainly old enough to understand that. So technique instruction needs to start when a swimmer begins swimming competitively. Yeah. And the components of deliberate practice can certainly be used when a swimmer starts swimming.
I can tell you from my experience that the kids enjoy a lot USRPT because what they really do is rehearse the real race, that in short intervals, but they are all the time like competing while training. It's very, very motivating for them.
Yeah, totally. And, the benefit of replicating competition and practice, I think it's, beyond the technical and physiological aspects of it. Can you speak a little bit to the mental aspect of it as well?
I'm not a psychologist. It's not my area.
Yeah. No,
okay,
yeah, like how do you see, at least like from your own experience, right, Paco, like when you have the kids or even elite athletes or triathletes, right, do this over and over and over, I feel like the level of confidence increases. Also, the physiology and, the work is also doing what it needs to do. What do you see that progression looking like?
I can tell you that it was one of main concerns for Brent Russell, the father of USRPT. Okay, he was always talking about the mental and psychology aspect of training, coaching. First is by the first thing that USRPT and this methodology of training, of coaching, helps mental health in swimmers, in competitive swimmers, is because they never get overtrained, so they don't get burned out. They don't overtrain because the USRPT has a built-in how to say, is like a switch that the swimmers stop swimming the moment they don't get to the times that they were supposed to get. So they have a target times with perfect technique, and if they don't get to the times, it's because technique is wrong or they are tired. So we stop, we talk, we try to fix it and go on, or maybe they can't go on and we stop. We call it a day. Sometimes we call it a day. That's absolutely unheard in traditional swimming, calling a day, because the swimmer cannot go anymore with this perfect technique. So it doesn't make any sense to go on like that. So it's in my experience, the swimmers that I told you before, they are enjoying, they're motivated, and they are rehearsing all the time. What they really, really love is to race. That's why they swim.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much. I know we could talk about this for hours, and we're excited to have you in our following sessions for underwater chats. So stay tuned throughout the year. We'll have Rod and Paco on in our sessions. So thank you all for your time. We're extremely grateful for what you've presented today.